ورحمة السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We are extremely honored to have our dear beloved brother, Sheikh Mohammad Elshinawy, all the way from Pennsylvania. I want to thank the religious committee and the executive committee for organizing this. May Allah Ta'ala put barakah into all of your lives. I'm going to have my brother Amanji introduce our dear beloved brother, our dear beloved Sheikh. Alhamdulillah, it's good to see many of our youth here in the audience. You guys are very lucky that Sheikh did not come a few weeks earlier when the weather was great and he could play basketball in the outdoor basketball court. Otherwise, be a lot of broken ankles right now. But alhamdulillah, I'm going to ask Brother Amanji to give the proper formal introduction.
So our beloved Sheikh Mohammad Elshinawy, like Imam has mentioned, traveled all the way from Pennsylvania to attend a speaking retreat with us. But our Sheikh Mohammad Elshinawy is the Associate Director of Systematic Theology at Yaqeen Institute. Sheikh Elshinawy is also a graduate of English Literature at Brooklyn College in New York City. He also studied at the College of Hadith at the University of Medina, and he is also a graduate and instructor at Mishkat University. He has translated many works for the International Islamic Publishing House, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, and Mishkat University. So without further ado, if we can all give Sheikh Mohammad Elshinawy our divided attention and give him a warm welcome. Sheikh Elshinawy.
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Is that correct, or is it under? Over the ear, under the ear?
As long as we do.
Meaning, is it like this? Okay. Jazakallah khair. Fantastic. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We begin in the name of Allah. All praise and glory be to Allah. And may His finest peace and blessings be upon His Messenger Muhammad and his family and his companions and all those who tread his path. We ask Allah to grant us and you a life upon his path and a death while adhering to his guidance, and a reunion around him and a drink from his blessed hand, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and an opportunity to see the face of his Lord and ours. Allahumma ameen. May Allah make all of our actions righteous and make them sincerely for his sake, and not allow any of his creation a share of our intentions. Allahumma ameen. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for coming through. We got a lot to cover. But let me just say a few things first. The first thing I will say is that I need your help to keep this interactive. So I will try to ask questions when I remember to do so, and you can stop me and ask questions whenever you feel the need to do so. Please ask questions. Sometimes there are people that have the same question as you, but they're too shy to ask. So ask on their behalf. Don't hesitate. If you're asking too many questions and we're not going to finish the content in time, I'll let you know. But the default is, let's make this a conversation so that we can have as many survivors as possible that reach the end of the course. All right? So the subject, as you know, is the pillars of faith. And the objective of the course is to fortify, to strengthen our faith. And just to give you to give you an overview of what we want to cover, inshallah. Is that working? Yeah, there it is. So we'll talk about the importance of faith very quickly. And the only reason we're going to talk about it very quickly is because you can never finish talking about it, right? And then we'll go through the fundamentals of faith, or the pillars of faith, the 6 articles of faith, and some important subsets we'll spend extra amounts of time on because I'm claiming that they are of particular emphasis or relevance and deserve to be emphasized because of that. And then tomorrow, inshallah, we will speak about the levels of faith. There are levels and degrees that we can actually measure, and you want to be able to measure something, because if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. It's a very famous sort of management principle in management. You can't manage your faith in the right direction. Improve your faith if you can't measure it. You don't have metrics to begin with, and Allah gave us metrics. And we'll talk about the different types of ways people fall out of faith or nullify their faith, and how to deal with the doubts which challenge our faith, and the diseases of the heart, because they are not just doubts. There are preliminary diseases that usually precede and lead up to doubts arriving. May Allah protect us. And then I'm going to give you the super shortcut, which is the ultimate fountain to continue replenishing your faith beyond the scope of this course, inshallah azza wa jal. And so the critical role of Iman, the critical role of faith, right? The importance of faith can't be overstated. What is faith? Faith is not just like some theory or some concept or some simplistic, lip service. It's a reality. It is the most important reality. The most important aspect and dimension of your health, your spiritual health, right? That you will not be saved on the day of judgment without it, right? And also you must, it's not like you get it and then you got it, so good or straight. No, it's a lifelong battle. It's a lifelong climb to grow your faith and then regrow your faith when it weakens, and to guard your faith against the things that weaken it. Even when Allah Azza wa Jal said, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, we have created the human being in a state of toil, constantly scrapping, constantly struggling, constantly striving. Some of the scholars said, this toil, what is intended by it primarily is the toil to retain your faith. The work you got to keep putting in to keep that faith of yours, keep that treasure, secure, to keep that flame alive. And the Sahaba understood that very much, that, everything can be compensated for. Anything can be recovered. Anything, so long as our deen is fine, right? Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, they asked him one time, هل كان أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يضحكون? Would the companions of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم at times laugh? Like, were they human? As we sometimes wonder, did they used to laugh? And he used to say, نعم والإيمان في قلوبهم أرسى من الجبال. Yeah, they would laugh, but while the faith in their hearts is more firmly anchored than mountains. Mountains don't move, right? Mountains ordinarily never move. And that is why one of the great sights of the Day of Judgment is the mountains floating away, right? And falling apart. So he's saying that, yeah, we would laugh, but we would not laugh in a way that would be heedless, that would cause us to forget our purpose in life. Like I often tell the youngsters, how many of you are in college? How many of you dorm? Anybody? Or have dormed? Away from family? You've dormed. Okay, good. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, your parents didn't trust you, okay? In your dorming years. And out of the blue, they caught you. They just showed up on campus one day and they caught you in the cafeteria. Would that be a problem? Answer the question. Wouldn't be a problem. Anyone thinks it would be a problem? Some of you are thinking like it depends, right? See? Is it Ramadan? It's a problem. With who? It's a problem. Yes? Is it class time right now? It's a problem. Right? Let's just focus on the last one for now. If it's class time right now and you're in the cafeteria, this is not why I sent you here. It's not haram or wrong or disappointing for you to be in the cafeteria. But it can't be at the expense of your education. That's why you're here, right? Likewise, you could be human, live and love and play and earn and all of that stuff, but never at the expense of your faith. That means you don't know why you're here. That means you've defeated the whole purpose. You're negligent of the whole purpose behind which this whole universe was created. That is what Ibn Umar was trying to reflect. And so that begs the question for all of us, inshallah, how many serious measures do we take regarding our faith, right? Like some of us that study the faith, we study it in almost a checklist fashion. I know the 5 pillars of Islam, and I know the 6 pillars of Iman, and I know the 7 conditions of valid salah at best, right? But how invested am I in making sure and checking up on and refining and replenishing my faith and keeping it alive and growing day by day, right? Like the time is ticking, yes? And the first thing and the most important thing we're going to be asked about is this faith of ours. Yes, faith will dip. It is natural for it to dip, but the general direction should be up if we have our heads on straight. So your faith should be something like this, right? Do you even measure, if that's the case, year after year over year, as they say in business? You know, the businessman can't go to sleep at night without checking on all his accounts, right? You are invested in your faith or not? That is the question. And so this course, inshallah, will just be a bit of the how and the what. How we should check up on our faith, how we should measure it. What is it exactly that we're talking about when we say faith? And that brings us to the discussion of its pillars, the foundation of our faith, those famous 6 articles. And in case someone has not come across it before, when the Prophet ﷺ was asked, Mal Iman, what is faith? He said, Iman is to believe in Allah and His angels and His books and His messengers and the last day, and to believe in destiny, khayrihi wa sharrih, the good of it and the evil, meaning that it all comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are known as the pillars of faith, the 6 pillars of faith. Got it? These are not the entirety of faith. You know, another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said to us that faith is 60 some odd branches, the highest of which is actualizing La ilaha illallah, the least of which is removing harmful objects from the road. Every believer should be like this, have that mindset. He said, and haya is one of the branches of faith, to have this healthy dose of shame in you, a religious conscience, if I can call it that. That is a part of our faith. So it's not everything, but these are the most important and where it all starts. Okay? The infrastructure. These are the beams. It's not the doors and the windows and the carpet and the aesthetic, but it has to begin there. These are irreplaceable. So we're going to speak about belief in Allah, and we could spend more than half of today's session on belief in Allah Azza wa Jal. Because the rest of the 5 are really a build on that. His angels, His messengers, His scriptures, His great day, really, day of judgment, right? His control over us, His fate or destiny for us, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I want to talk about Allah, and this is arbitrary. Don't get all uncomfortable if people say, you know, belief in Allah has 3 pillars, belief in Allah has 2 pillars, belief in Allah has 4 pillars. These are modes of education. These are arbitrary. None of these categories are in that number in the Quran or the Sunnah. None of them. They're just ways to highlight different aspects of belief in Allah so that you don't drop anything, to make sure you're thinking about it the right way. So in the past, you will never hear a scholar really saying, belief in Allah, number 1, means you believe in His existence. They would never say that. Why? Why do you think the scholars would never say that? And audacious me is saying it. Because it was unnecessary. It was a given. Atheism didn't exist, right? As like a societal trend, right? But since it is very prevalent and the conversation happens a lot nowadays, I want you to become conversant in it. Not just so you can articulate your faith to others, but also, and more importantly, so that nobody robs you of the most valuable thing you have, causes you to doubt in the thing that you should have the greatest certainty in, which is belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sorry, I stole a slide from Yaqeen Institute. This is their slide deck on God's existence, or the case for God's existence in the Quran and Sunnah. So when people often debate on whether God exists or not, and what is the proof that you have, one of the biggest parts that is missed in this conversation is what qualifies as proof? I might come back to this point, but in case I don't, if anyone asks you, how do you know that God exists? How are you sure that God exists? The best answer on the face of the earth, sort of, for me, the best place to start is, how do you know you exist? Because that will help people understand exactly what they're asking for. When they demand of you proofs for God's existence, well, what proofs would you accept? This will help many people realize that they actually don't have an answer to that question. This is called epistemology, right? Where truth comes from. How do you learn things? What constitutes proof, right? And many atheists, very famous atheists, debating atheists, they've said stuff like this. They've said, I actually don't know. What proof would convince me? And the Quran actually spoke about this. The Quran said, وَلَوْ فَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَابًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. Even if we were to open for them a gate in the skies, فَظَلُّوا فِيهِ يَعْرُجُونَ, and we allowed them to ascend, to climb up into the heavens, they would say what? Who knows the next ayah? لَقَالُوا إِنَّمَا سُكِّرَتْ أَبْصَارُنَا. They'll say there's something wrong with our eyes. We've been bewitched. Someone did a spell on us. بَلْ نَحْنُ قَوْمٌ مَسْحُورُونَ. Maybe we're high. Maybe we're intoxicated. So this issue is not a problem of the absence of proof, right? This is a psychology of doubt, a mindset that is riddled with radical, extreme skepticism. Is that clear? So don't feel bad when someone tells you, there are no proofs, because no proofs to him, because he doesn't have a baseline for proofs. There are no proofs to him. So how can you convince him of something he's not willing to believe? That's a very important aspect. There are so many proofs against atheism. We'll talk about them now a bit at a time. But just to realize that just because they're good proofs doesn't mean that person is going to accept them. Is that clear? Always keep the huge difference between finding the truth and wanting the truth. Very different things. May Allah grant us guidance and always keep our hearts and minds open to the truth. Say Ameen. Okay. I usually find it useful with not just youth, for you to understand why so many people think like this nowadays, where this radical doubt comes from. It comes from trauma, civilizational trauma. I call it civilizational trauma. Is this on? Yeah, Western civilizational trauma. I'm going to share with you now a story on the medical history behind the trauma, the PTSD that Western civilization has, especially about God. Okay? William Tyndale. Familiar, anybody? Who's William Tyndale? He's often associated with the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther and all those guys, right? So William Tyndale was the first guy who translated the Bible into the English language, okay? And of course, when that happened, people started wondering, why is the church saying stuff and the Bible doesn't seem to be saying that stuff, right? And so certain beliefs of the church were being challenged, at around the same time the Bible now is becoming accessible. It wasn't accessible. Keep that in mind. For 1,500 years, the people felt betrayed, trauma. 1,500 years, they didn't know what existed in their books for the most part, right? Illiteracy prevailed. He translates the Bible into English, along with a whole bunch of other stuff that him and people that are like-minded did. So how'd they thank him? They burned him at the stake. Okay? They killed him and they burned him at the stake. Fast forward a little bit, Martin Luther, of course, also tries to offer, an alternative to the Roman Catholic church's version of Christianity. And of course, he goes through what he goes through. Fast forward about 100 years, Galileo comes along. So who's Galileo? This is all related. These are not just like fun facts. Yeah, what was Galileo famous for? Come on, science project folks. Yes, sir. Yeah, so, Leeuwenhoek invented the telescope, or he played with glass, invented the telescope. Galileo's now looking into the, the cosmos, and they're like, wait a minute, the Earth does not appear to be the center of the galaxy, at least, right? You say the universe, but they mean the galaxy. And the church says the Earth is the center, God created the Earth, but that doesn't really add up, right? And so now there's more and more distrust snowballing regarding the church and everything the church has been telling them, okay? So first, the translation of the Bible doesn't really match up. Then now the scientific revolution is starting to brew with Galileo and otherwise. You know, that's why Galileo, when he said what he said, they invited him over. He was arrested, and they invited him over, and they gave him the extended tour of the dungeons, right? And they told him, take it back. He says, yeah, take what back? I didn't say anything. Absolutely, you're fine. You're right. And he took everything back. But you can't really take back ideas. He already said it. People were convinced of it. So the fact that Galileo spent like the last 9 or 10 years of his life under house arrest and died in his house didn't change anything. The resistance was starting. The ideological resistance to the church and everything it stood for was starting. People were beginning now to say, no, we need to start thinking for ourselves, right? We've been sort of spoon-fed lies for too long. Be open-minded. That's called sort of the age of reason now. Scientific revolution, the age of reason. The age of reason, so enlightenment, age of reason, that's basically when people lost confidence. Keep in mind, this is an important term. This is when people lost confidence in God's knowledge. Say, we don't know what God knows. We have no idea, like, which book is God's book, what God actually said. There's no way to know sort of godly truths. So they started pivoting to the age of reason, meaning man's knowledge. Let's figure it out ourselves, right? Then that's what brings in Mr. René Descartes. I'll come back to René Descartes. But René Descartes, you guys know René Descartes, the father of modern philosophy. What's he really famous for? He made a few memes for Instagram, right? What's Descartes famous for? I think, therefore I am. Jazakallah khairan. So he said, listen, I can't trust anything. The only thing I know is that I can think. And so, got to open my mind. Got to be skeptical. You see it? It's starting now. René Descartes. Fast forward now another 100 years. See, guys, I'm giving you guys 3 years of European intellectual history in 10 minutes. Okay? Just don't forget to donate in the box. Okay? Denis Diderot. Denis Diderot was a French philosopher now who brought it all together and said, listen, guys, man will never be free. We've been duped for the past 1800 years. Man will never be free until the last king is hung by the entrails, the intestines of the last priest. So the government and the church, they did a number on us, right? They were in cahoots together. So if we want to be free, we got to get rid of the government. We got to get rid of the church. So he said his famous line, man will never be free until the last monarch, the last king, is hung by the entrails, the intestines of the last priest. He died before the French Revolution started, but when the French Revolution started, that was literally the chant in the streets. The mobs were out there saying, man will never be free until the last monarch is hung by the intestines of the last priest. Very nasty, right? Okay, but it's building. Fast forward 100 years, you got Karl Marx. After a whole bunch of other revolutions happened now, Karl Marx is saying what? This whole religion stuff. Religion is the opium of the masses. Religion is the sigh of the suffering. It's just a way to sedate you, to keep you quiet, keep you calm, keep you pacified, complacent. No such thing as religion. This religion stuff is bogus. And then you have the famous philosopher, Nietzsche, who said what? And forgive me for saying this in the masjid. It's not haram to repeat statements that are kufr, because Allah told us kufri statements, Banu Israel said in the Quran, right? You don't, naql al-kufr laysa bi kafir, right? So what did Nietzsche say? Come on, guys. Yes, they said God is dead. He said God is dead. And Thomas Hardy wrote his famous poem in 1908 called A'udhu Billah, called God's Funeral, right? 1928, I'm sorry. No, he died in 1928. Anyway, all of this happening, what does it have to do with atheism? Obviously culminated in atheism. When they realized and felt betrayed by the church, they overreacted and said, there's no religion that's true. the belief in God to begin with is unreliable. There's no point in thinking about these things anymore. And now let's talk about how we can actually make sense of our lives and our world, which is science and reason, logic and science. That's why people tell you, give me proof for God, and it better be scientific. Because they've lost hope. It's traumatizing. It can't be religious proof. It can't be non-scientific proof to them. So let me just pull out a few more cool memes, because you guys like memes. So this is what brings us to this point in time where we live. This is in the air. Whether you know the history of the personalities and the timeline I just explained, that's all irrelevant. The fact is, we swallow this hook, line, and sinker. It is pervasive. It's in the air. We breathe it in, whether we like it or not. In the movie, in the billboard, in the school curriculum, in the advertisement, it's everywhere. These notions, right? No such thing as truth, right? How many ever heard that's your truth? Never, no such thing as truth. That's called radical skepticism. That's, by the way, no one actually believes that, by the way. No one actually believes no such thing as truth. Does anyone here believe no such thing as truth? Prove me wrong. So I remember this line bothers me so much because the first time my philosophy professor said it to me in college, I didn't have the answer yet. It was so foolish that I didn't have an answer, right? But when someone tells you there's no such thing as truth, besides the fact that they're just being lazy, right? You know, to believe nothing or to believe everything, right? To be gullible or to be like, no such thing as truth. This is just laziness, right? It's just an excuse to not think, right? But what do you say to someone who says there's no such thing as truth? Come on, people, think with me. What do you say to someone like that? Can you guys read this? You guys can't read this, right? I'm so sorry. So agnostic is someone who's basically, the verdict is out. I can't really prove anything. So an agnostic is a person who says he knows nothing about God and who, when you agree with him, becomes angry. You can't say you're right because he believes right is not provable. You get it? So that is the first response. When people say there's no such thing as truth, you tell them, is that true? Do you understand? Do you understand? Because what you're actually saying is, whether you realize it or not, the truth is there's no such thing as truth. It's circular. That's the problem. Right? This second meme is just cute, but it's not just there because it's cute. If olive oil is made of olives, then baby oil is made of. That idea of like, you know, I've been surprised, so I'm doubting everything now. You know, all religions are man-made, right? All truths are not provable. It's an overreaction. Humans do this all the time. You know, like if I were to go to, I'm not going to say Egypt, okay? So you don't get upset. If I were to say that I went to Egypt and then someone stole my wallet and I come back and they're like, yo, how was Egypt? They're like, oh man, all a bunch of thieves. All a bunch of thieves. There's 90 million Egyptians. One of them stole your wallet. How are they all a bunch of thieves? That's human nature. These like sweeping generalizations, right? So your teacher will come along and say, all religions are man-made. Like, excuse me, hold up. How many religions have you studied exactly? All religions are man-made? You're like a biology professor with all due respect, right? Have you even studied Christianity, let alone Islam, right? It's trauma. It is just, they feel the sense of betrayal and thus they are reacting this way. So atheism is really just a version, one of many versions of skepticism, radical doubt. Your psychology can't snap out of it. Some people are reality skeptics, like, how do I know I'm alive? Right? How do I know I'm alive? I remember one young brother, Egyptian brother, his father insisted that I sit down with his son. His son had a little bit of too much philosophy 101, right? And he got intoxicated with it. And by the way, Francis Bacon said this, a little bit of philosophy will drive you away from religion, and then more philosophy will bring you back to God, right? You just, at first glance, you get all, you know, you think you know stuff. So he said, there's no such thing as truth. I said to him, okay, but if I slap you right now, you can't call the cops because maybe the truth is it didn't really happen. It happened during your imagination. And if I take your shirt right now, you can't really, file charges because maybe that's my shirt, right? Right or wrong. So some people are, very few though, but that's like a reality skeptic. I'm just showing him that you're not a reality skeptic. Just when it comes to God, you want to say, oh, there's no God, right? I'm going to be skeptical about that. And some people are morality skeptics, right? Like, how do I know rights from wrongs, right? Is there such thing as rights from wrongs? And by the way, if you're an atheist and you want to be consistent, you should be a morality skeptic. Where do you get rights and wrongs from to begin with? That's a discussion for another time. But really, if the universe is a happy accident, right? Like a cosmic fluke, then it's just gases and chemicals colliding. No such thing as rights and wrongs. What is justice really? What is happiness? Are we willing to accept that? No such thing as justice and happiness. No such thing as love. No one actually lives like this, right? Very few do. And so some people are just God skeptics. Case in point, some people are just God skeptics. They place this unattainable amount of proof that they can't identify for believing in God because they're just not able to shake off the doubt they've inherited as a civilization. Any questions about this? Should I skip this slide? I'll skip this slide. You can ignore this, right? Basically, I said it's like age of reason. These are the two types of reason, right? One type of reason is called deductive reasoning. That's logic. Just think Aristotle. The other one is called inductive reasoning. Think science, scientific investigation, Sherlock Holmes, right? That's the idea. They got locked into these two paths, right? Deductive reason, inductive reason, meaning logic and science. But why? Why do we human beings think that our reasoning, whether it's logical reasoning or scientific reasoning, is perfect, right? What's better, logic or science, by the way? That's a long discussion. Anybody want to argue either? You guys just don't care and want me to move to the next slide? You'd say logic. Okay. Anybody? How many people say logic is stronger than science? How many say science is stronger than logic? And the rest of you believe that voting is haram. So, I mean, they both have their value. Like, don't miss my point here. I'm talking about overconfidence in logic, right? Overconfidence in science. Science we can infer, like understand through science, some aspects of our physical world. It's called the physical sciences for a reason. That's why God shouldn't be in that discussion. God is not part of the physical world, right? Don't ask me for scientific proof for God. You know, like during the space race, they say, I forgot who he was, the Russian astronaut that famously said, you know, we're now in outer space and I can confirm now that there is no God. There's no God. So one of, Yuri Gagarin, that was his name? Minnulillah. So one of the mashayikh said to him, one of the scholars said to him, when he said there is no God, he said, you can't see a God, you just wait till your oxygen runs out. Because that's the idea. It's not about how far you can send your rocket ship, you're going to see God. God is not seeable in this world. That is the test of our life. Are we going to believe in the unseen and be rewarded with seeing the greatest reality, the divine reality, Allah Azza wa Jalla, in the hereafter? That's the whole idea. It's not about telescopes or spaceships, right? So, but science we can get some truths. We can work with science. We can benefit from science. I mean, I am using a MacBook, aren't I? Right? About the physical world only. So just realize the limitations of science. And then when it comes to logic, you can also, through logic, you can understand some truths, basic truths about reality. That's it. That's all. Cause and effect, right? This is different than that. What is the greatest truth and the most obvious truth that logic will tell you? That there must be a God, right? And I want to now bring you back to Descartes, not to bore you. Are you guys bored yet? Anybody gonna pass out? Okay. Anyone gonna throw me out the message talking to philosophy? Okay, good. So Descartes, I told you guys, he said, I think, therefore I am. What many people don't know about Descartes, can I stand? Zoomers, forgive me, Zoomers. Many people don't know, this is really useful, that Descartes actually had a crisis of faith in his life. Because when he started saying, I'm not going to believe in anything until I doubt it first and then prove it, and then I'm going to believe in it when there's proof. So I'm going to doubt everything. The only thing I know is that I can think, and I can think through things, and so I'm only going to trust that. Then it hit him. It should hit him, right? If you're doubting everything, wait a minute. How do I know I'm thinking? Right? I'm just assuming I can think. How do I know? He didn't say this, but he said the equivalent of this. How do I know I'm not plugged to the matrix? Don't act like you guys don't know what the matrix is. Just say astaghfirullah enough. Okay? How do I know, he said, that I'm not being manipulated by demons? Right? How? Like, why should I use my mind? Why do I assume that my mind is actually, how do I know? I'm not a part of an alien's imagination. I know half of the parents here are saying, what did you bring the sheikh to do to our kids, all right? How do I know I'm not part of a video game? How do I know? So he concluded, he was forced to conclude. There's no point in thinking things unless you know that you can think, that you know that you exist. That's why I told you the best answer is how you know you even exist, right? He said, I arrived at the conclusion that God is not a deceiver. And he has given me the tools with which I can investigate the world around me. And since he has given me those tools, God's not a deceiver, therefore I should use those tools. Notice, in order for you to investigate, you have to already remove God from the investigation. Is that clear? So we are more certain that God exists than we are certain that we exist. Is that clear? That is why of Allah's beautiful names, Al-Haq, the truth, the ultimate truth. Allah can never be subject to doubt. We are sure about him. We have to be sure about him. Because if we're not sure about God, we can't be sure about ourselves. How do you even know that you exist? Right? And that's why I used to always wonder growing up, why Allah knew there'd be atheists. Until the end of time, the number of atheists might grow in certain periods of history. Why does the Quran never address atheists? It doesn't. Because atheists are just people in denial, right? There is no true atheist out there. They say there's no atheist on a sinking ship. There's no atheist in a foxhole, right? There's no atheist in a battle trench. Deep down inside, you know there's a God. There's no doubt regarding God. God is the most undoubtable thing in the universe, or not in the universe, you know what I mean, in existence. And that's what actually the Quran does. So look at these two ayat. In one ayah, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, is there doubt about Allah, who's the originator of the heavens and the earth? This is called a rhetorical question. What's a rhetorical question? Yeah, a question that doesn't need to be answered, a question that answers itself, right? Didn't I tell you to clean your room? That's stronger than saying I told you to clean your room, right? The point of a rhetorical question is not to gain information. It is to humble the person you're questioning, because what it really means is you and I both know that I told you to clean your room. So when Allah says, is there any doubt about God? It means you and I both know there's no doubt about it. God is not doubtable. God is not subject to investigation. I'm talking about God existing. I'm talking about Islam being true. We didn't get there yet, right? Just that concept of the existence of God. And the other ayah that says, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْحَقُّ وَأَنَّهُ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. That is because Allah is the truth. He's the truest reality. So that's our inner surety, right? It's built into us. And it's perfectly logical, right? It's perfectly logical. You know, the other ayat in Surah Al-Tur, maybe I do have some time to cover them quickly. Allah Azza wa Jal said in Surah Al-Tur, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ. It's all rhetorical. Notice the pattern. Were they created out of nothing? That's not really a question, because no one is supposed to answer. No one in their right mind will ever answer, yes, I came out of nothing. That's insanity, right? I came out. You don't know of anything that ever came out of nothing. Why do you insist that you came out of nothing? You're just in denial. You're just being argumentative. The verse goes on to say, or did they create themselves? That's even tougher, right? Like, instead of saying I came out of nothing, say I created myself. Like, well, how does that work? Like, the bottle made the bottle. That's even harder, because you'd have to be here before you got here to bring yourself here. Your brain starts smoking at that point, right? The next verse says, it's so nice, like it's actually getting harder and harder. Allah is humbling them, right? He's saying to them, you know you didn't come out of nothing. You know you didn't create yourself. You know you didn't create the universe, so just submit to Islam with them. Submit to the Quran. That's the meaning of the verses. It's not arguing with an atheist. It's reminding them that you're actually not an atheist. That's the idea. It's refusing to entertain the notion of atheism. It's changing their attention to the fact that they do have conviction about God, even if there's some dust they threw on top of that conviction. They're trying to bury it. So were they created out of nothing, or did they create themselves, or did they create the universe? Why is creating the universe harder than creating yourself? Why? It's so cool. Go ahead. The universe was there before you, right? You can't be here before yourself. Remember we said that? You definitely can't be here before the universe. No way. Right? No, rather they're not certain. They're just riddled with doubt. And I love this line, and I'll leave you with it. Dr. Abdul Hakim Murad mentions it often. He says, God is not a reality that needs to be explained. It's the opposite. You don't tell me proof for God. God's the proof for us, right? Rather, God is the explanation for reality. So the proofs for Allah are built in. It's called our fitrah, our natural original state. And then you have the ayat, the signs of Allah everywhere, right? I wanted to play this video for you, but I'm not going to, because it'll ruin the whole setup here. But you should look this video up. Plants germinating, time lapse. Just watching that is like a huge reviver of your iman in Allah Azza wa Jal. To see how these plants are guided to go up for the sunlight and down for the water, and just see it happen over and over and over and over perfectly, right? It really is. It's mesmerizing. So the proofs for God are built in, and they're logical, and they're in every nook and cranny of this universe. It's all there. You don't need to go far, right? You don't need to go far. It is not the absence of proof for God's existence that we have today. It's the presence of people being distracted, people being arrogant, the presence of people feeling this sense of betrayal we have to sort of heal them out of. That's the only reason why atheism sort of had a little bit of a stint in the postmodern world. Is that clear, everybody? Are there any questions? Oh my God, there's a bunch of sisters upstairs. Assalamu alaikum, sisters. Did I miss your hand going up anytime? Forgive me. Just shout, okay? Or throw a tomato or something. But on the table, not the carpet. Any questions from anybody? Very good. Should we go through this slide? Yeah, it's only because it's cute. It really has no purpose being there. This is that chicks are cute and they're weak. And so the irony of the weak chick saying, come at me, bro, is extra cute. That's it. No, actually, why I threw those there, I'm not crazy. The reason I threw those there is a reminder for me to mention to you how the early scholars of Islam would revive people's faith only with the simplest proofs. Because if these little proofs will not be enough, the big proofs will not be enough. Because it's the presence of arrogance, not the absence of proof. Proofs are clear, so many, countless. So they asked Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, back to the chick. They asked him, what is the proof of a grand designer, al-Khaliq, right? He said the chick. He could have said something, very complex and convoluted, and right, that overcomplicate things the way I do accidentally sometimes, right? He said the chick in the egg. No source of food from the outside, right? It has its food in there with it, subhanAllah, right? No source of oxygen. That thing is, it doesn't let oxygen in. And it's self-contained and survives and grows. And only when it's able to survive on the outside, it is told to peck the walls of its world, right? To break the egg and come out. Who did that for it? Who taught it that? Who gave it the right timing? Who? Subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's enough proof for me there's a God, he's saying. That's it. You don't need to go far. It was reported, you guys know what these are? These are not maggots. What are these? Yes, sir. Sort of. Who has it? Come on, folks. Wrong. I love you too. These are silkworms. These are silkworms, sisters. This is where you guys get the good stuff. Yes. So they asked Imam Shafi'i the proof for a grand designer. He said, actually, he said the leaf. He said, waraq al-tut, the berry leaf. Silkworms like to eat berry leaves. I don't know why I asked him. So he said the silkworm eats it and makes silk. And the cow might eat it and it'll make milk. Oh, that rhymes. He says, and not something else will eat it and it'll just make poop. Right? Basically. Who created all of these different factories that are eating the exact same thing and producing all of these different byproducts that sustain us, by the way? They clothe us and they quench us and all of this, right? Who created this whole system? This interdependent, intricate system. Abu Hanifa, I'll give you the final one. I don't have one for Imam Malik, but Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, it was said about him that some guy who was a heckler tried to argue with him about God not existing. And this shows you that atheists existed. 5 minutes left, got it. Atheism existed in the past. It was just never a societal trend. It's trending now for different reasons. They say science and technology is the reason why we know now that there's no God. No, science, technology have just made you arrogant. And the more arrogant you are, the less recognizing of God you are. That's it, right? Luxury and arrogance, they do this stuff. Inna al-insana la yatgha an ra'ahu istaghna. Allah said that. Human being always crosses limits whenever he forgets that he has needs, whenever he feels like he has no more needs. It's normal, expected. The Quran predicted atheism. So Abu Hanifa, a guy just one isolated incident. A guy said to him, how do we know there's proof for God? You can't prove it. He said, okay, I'm busy right now. I'm going to come to you at a certain time and we'll talk about it. I'll debate you on this. And so Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, it is said that he showed up to the meeting, the debate, late, on purpose. Abu Hanifa was the man. So he gets there late on purpose, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to come late, but I was stuck. It's traffic. I was stuck, and between me and you was a stream, and I couldn't get across the stream or the river, but out of nowhere, a tree just fell by itself, alhamdulillah. It got carved out into a canoe all by itself, alhamdulillah, and it just carried me over to you all by itself, alhamdulillah. I'm adding dramatic effect, okay, guys? He didn't say it like that, but basically that's the story he told the man. So the man's yeah, right, you expect me to, you're late, you're scared. You expect me to believe that happened all by itself? He said, that's exactly why I'm not going to debate you. You can't believe that a canoe was made by itself, and you want me to believe that this whole universe was made by itself? So he beat him in the debate before they said go. Before they said 1, 2, 3. He finished him before he started. Right? That's all you need. And even, Al-Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, rahimahullah, he mentions, Zamakhshari, his tafsir, he mentions very famously that when they asked a Bedouin man, that's the idea, just focus on the pattern here, guys, simplicity. When they asked the Bedouin man, what is proof that there's a God? He said, Al-ba'ratu tadullu ala al-ba'ir. Like, hear this guy out there. This is a guy that's not educated, doesn't even live in a city, just out in the desert. He says al-ba'ra. You know what guys know what ba'ra is? Ba'ra is number 2. Ba'ra is poop, like defecation. Because when I see poop on the ground, that means there was a camel here. And when I see footprints over there, that means there was travelers here. And so these skies filled with constellations of stars, and this earth that is so wide and available for us to build and plant on and graze our animal, and these earth that is so vast, that doesn't tell me that there is someone best acquainted with it all. Notice what he's pointing at. And so when you speak to an atheist, it's not just important to follow this method, to be like, philosophically sound and stuff. You need to reflect this sentiment. Like, what you're saying is not like, incorrect. What you're saying is bananas. Like, you want to be polite, right? And you want to be civil and all this stuff. But you have to really help them understand you're saying something wild. Like, there's nothing behind it all. Do you really believe this? That is the Quranic sentiment that you want to reflect to them. Is this actually something we can debate about? So that's it. And I spent a full hour on it. I want to speak about what it means now to believe in the oneness of Allah. After we pray our salah now, we will speak about Tawheed, how to believe in Allah's oneness, factually speaking, in terms of what we believe about Him, and also functionally speaking, meaning how we devote ourselves to Him. The 2 aspects of Tawheed, we'll talk about them now in the next session, and then move on to, inshallah, the angels and the books and the messengers and other ones. Jazakallah khairan, everybody. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.